Okay, so first up, couple action items right off the top. Again, like I'm Jen Psaki. I'm so glad I'm not, because her job is hard. This is being filmed incredibly early in the morning, and yet we still have loads of activity going on around the pontoon because needs must. And so you may see Mr. Soap and Clay, you may see the dogs, you may even see the kids, although this early I kind of doubt it, but you know, whatever, we'll see. So we are sitting as well today because, not because I'm tired or anything, but just because I quite liked sitting when I was talking about the labeling and the defining of soap and cosmetic and drugs before. And so I'm going to do that again today. So there's that. Third, there is a fly buzzing around in here and it's driving me nuts. So you might see it or you might hear me yell at it because I found that that's the most effective way to deal with flies. None of that really has a whole lot to do with what we're talking about today. It's just kind of everything else. I will tell you what we are talking about in just a minute. But before I do, hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things. And you are here for day 85 of 365 days of soap, year 2. And today we are following up the defining soap, cosmetic, and drug video with a labeling video. Now, if you missed the first part in this series, you know, I'll link it up there somewhere. You can go check that out. It's definitely a very good primer for you to determine what it is that you're making and whether or not you've been doing something wrong, really. And so, you know, go check that out. Probably likely most of you are not doing anything wrong, but, you know, go check that out and learn why. Yes. So we did not really get into the labeling with all of that, which is what I originally set out to do. So today we are going to be talking about soap labeling and how you're supposed to do it, because it can get very confusing if you read forums or go to the Facebook pages or do all the things, because people have opinions and they're weird. So we're going to talk about that. We are going to basically talk specifically about soap labeling today and not get too in the weeds with cosmetics, although probably we'll touch on that a little bit. I'm thinking we need a third parter just to do the cosmetics because it is a little bit different. So first things first, just in case you did not watch the last video or, you know, you forgot or whatever, we should talk about first and foremost, who is in charge of regulating soap? Well, in order to do that, we're going to go to the FDA. Again, little refresher. Back to fda.gov and quote, if your product meets the regulatory definition of soap, it's regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, not by the FDA. Please direct questions about requirements for these products to CPSC. So I did that thing because the FDA says it's not their problem. Go to the CPSC. And so I did that thing. Here at the CPSC website, the FDA's regulations, yep. And you can read the entire regulation. Okay. The CPSC regulate, okay. Quote, the CPSC regulates only true soaps, not cosmetics or drugs, that are made primarily of fats, and alkalis that are manufactured for consumer use. To that end, except for products primarily intended for use by children aged 12 and younger, CPSC does not have specific requirements for soaps. Okay, so the CPSC says, okay, well, yeah, it's our issue, but we don't have specific requirements. And that was a little bit confusing to me. And so what I did was I scrolled down the CPSC thing and I sent an email. And this is the email that I sent. And I do talk about Marie Gale and soap, font sizing, etc., etc., etc. Okay. Thank you for contacting the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. I received your inquiry to the CPSC copied below, and there it is what I asked about. The CPSC regulates only true soaps, not cosmetics or drugs that are made primarily of fats and alkalis and that are manufactured for consumer use. So as long as your product is a true soap and not primarily for children 12 or younger, CPSC does not have specific labeling or certification requirements for soap, and you are not required to register your company with CPSC. And the highlighting, that was her doing, not my doing. She then goes on though. We have a website which describes these requirements in more detail, which is the website we were just on. So more detail is, I guess, subjective. Then she also goes ahead and puts in extra web pages from the FDA, which we went through in the last video. So thank you for the help. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And then she puts in this little bit here. The Fair Packaging and Labeling Act. The Federal Trade Commission requires that all consumer commodities be labeled to disclose net contents, identity of commodity, and name and place of business of the product's manufacturer, packer, or distributor. See the FTC's website for more information. Okay. So, this is where things get very confusing because, technically speaking, CPSC states they don't have specific labeling requirements. But since she linked the whole thing for the FTC and the Fair Packaging Labeling Act in this email, it suggests that labeling is required. Yes, but also no. And honestly, I think this is where the big problem comes in with the whole, how do you label? Do you have to label? What are the requirements for labeling? Because the government in and of itself is actually confused on this. And so that's why people are always fighting about it. That's why, you know, books like this exist. So if the ombudsman from the CPSC just confirmed what I had already learned from the CPSC website, which is that the CPSC does not have specific labeling requirements for soap, and the FDA does not govern soap. And so it doesn't fall underneath cosmetic labeling guidelines. And the CPSC has not published any sort of guidelines. That's the end of the video, right? No guideline, no labeling requirements are needed for soap. Do whatever you want. End of video. Goodbye. Thank you for coming. No, that's not true because she put that extra link in there to the FTC and the FPLA. We have to dig a little deeper. What is the FPLA? The Fair Packaging and Labeling Act was put into law in 1966. It's been around a long time. It's basically stating that everything that is considered a consumer commodity is required to be labeled in some kind of way. So here we go with the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act. And in all actuality, it's not a very long act at all. Really not a lot of sections. And basically what it says throughout the entire thing is saying essentially this. Quote, the commodity shall bear a label specifying the identity of the commodity and the name and place of business of the manufacturer, packer, or distributor. End quote. We already heard that. We already heard that from the ombudsman. The FPLA does go on to talk about units of measurement and the size of the lettering, essentially. But really what it says within the text is that the size of the lettering is in relation to the size of the actual principal panel, right? And the principal panel would be like the main thing that people see first when they pick up something. And so really just kind of going through here It really goes on to describe what a random package is, what an insert package is, and all the things. And, it's good information. Go ahead and read through this on your own. Different regulations based on different things. If it's cosmetic, it's different. You got to go to the FDA. If it's an alcohol, it's different. You got to go to ATF. If it's or tobacco, those sorts of things. Now, to define the term consumer commodity, the term consumer commodity, starting right up here, except as otherwise specifically provided by the subsection, means any food, drug, device, or cosmetic by the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and any other article, product, or commodity of any kind or class which is customarily produced or distributed for sale through retail sales agencies or instrumentalities for consumption by individuals or use by individuals for purpose of personal care or in the performance of services ordinarily rendered within the household, and which usually is consumed or expended in the course of such consumption or use. And it gives some exemptions regarding food and controlled substances. Soap is not one of them. So based on that definition, soap definitely falls within this category, for sure. There's no way around it. This is something that is a consumer commodity. It is used for personal use or household use. It is consumed, used up, therefore, within the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act, right? Which totally makes sense. So to that, you need to follow their guidelines, which again, basically says you have to say what it is, you have to list how much it weighs, and you have to say where it's from. We are going to get back to the where it is from and listing your business on there, because we are not going to speed past that one at all. We will definitely put a pin in that. We're coming back. I am going to go to usma.org just to show you. We're not really going to get into metrics and all of this because it's not really necessary for purposes of this video. You list your weight. You can never list higher weights. You can always list lower weight. And so if your bars cut at 5 ounces, but they cure to 4.5, put 4.5, put 4.25, whatever, put 4 ounces. Just don't ever say that it's 5 ounces when you know that it's going to lose weight during the cure. That's basically what you need to do when you are, doing the whole labeling of the weights on your products. But I did want to go to usma.org anyway, just to show you that this bill continues to be in flux all of the time. People are paying attention to it-ish. And, governmental processes, they take a while to change. And so you need to keep your knowledge up to date and pay attention to these things, because things could change and you might be falling, you might be in violation without realizing it, 5 years down the road. If that happens and the YouTube is still a thing, I will of course update. But, I just wanted to show you just these pink sections here showing that we have proposed changes currently in place with this existing bill, with this existing law, which is customary. It's usual. That's something that happens quite often with all laws. So just keep that in mind. Now, this was another interesting thing that I did want to point out, and we will go back to the usma.org in just a minute to kind of show that. So while the FPLA is the law, it's not the full law, right? If a law were to be written, putting in absolutely everything and every conceivable whatever, it would be wildly long and they would still miss something and there would still be a loophole and a thing that someone could exploit for this to mean thus, whatever. And so as it states here at the usma.org, what are the implementing regulations? It's the law passed by Congress, but it's not really the law regarding package labels because it doesn't get into every minor detail. Right. Instead, Congress delegates the details to appropriate federal agencies. In this case, the FTC and the FDA. So what does that mean? That means the law is not the whole thing. It's the thing, but then they have other agencies that take care of specific things. FTA, FTC, ATF, CPSC. Now the FDA did a hard pass on soap. They went, nope, we don't want it, we don't care. That's the CPSC's problem. And the CPSC says we don't have specific labeling requirements. So this is exactly where you can both not label your soap at all, sell naked bars, or label your soap. But if you're going to label your soap, you need to follow the FPLA guidelines for labeling. A label specifying the identity, the net quantity of the contents, and where it's from. Business name and address. That's basically it. I would like to just a sidebar on this. Somewhere in Marie Gale's book, it actually does say that like the net weight has to be in the lower 30% of the principal display panel. And I can't find that information anywhere. And when I talked to the FTC, they couldn't find it either. So I don't know. And if somebody can find that information somewhere within this bill, please let me know. So we know now that if you want to label your soaps, you need to label them right. Okay? Or you can sell naked. But if you're going to label them, you have to label them right. And again, that's product identity, net weight, and business location. Note no ingredients list. So just keep that in mind first and foremost. These are the three things we are focusing on right now. So first up, product identity. Why does it matter? Well, let me give you an example. Several years ago, Mr. Soap and Clay came home with a bag of bombs from Lush. And I'm like, what are those? What are they used for? I legitimately had no idea. I make soap. I don't pay attention to other stuff, whatever. And he's like, I don't know. The people at the store said that they, fizzed and stuff in the tub. So I thought the girls might like them. And they did. But I didn't know what they were. And so just think about a product that might be confusing in your shop, right? Or online or whatever, in your line. That's why product identity matters, because there's going to be someone, probably a Gen Zer, that's going to see a bar of soap and they've only ever used liquid soap out of squeeze bottles their whole entire lives and go, well, what is that? I have no idea. So that's why you have to put what it is on the package. Even though it sounds so weird and just weird to put soap on your label, that's why. People need to know what it is. And it's just as simple as that. Okay, now going on to the net weight. Also, I just touched on that. Your weight needs to be no more than what the fully cured weight of your product is. So again, if you cut your bars at 5 ounces and they cure down to 4.5, put 4.5 on your label, put 4.25. You can undershoot, but you can never overshoot. And the net weight does need to be on the front principal display panel. And as I said, when I talked to the FTC, they could not point me in the right direction for the lower third or 30% or whatever, the principal display panel either. So whatever. Okay. Now, another thing that comes up all of the time with labeling, since we are talking about the areas and locations, is the font. Oh my God, the font. People get so weirdly specific on these forums about what size your font has to be. And immediately, logically, that doesn't make sense. I think I touched on this in the last video, talking about like lip balm tubes and how tiny they are and how essentially the whole tube becomes the principal display panel, but you can still only get a really small font on that. So obviously there are not font size requirements, not drilled down to that specificity anyway. There are size requirements based on the size of the display panel. And so if you have a very small area in which you can get all of your information, obviously the font exists in relation to that. Basically what this means is your net weight and your ingredients, should you put them on there, should not be so small that they can't be easily read. You can probably just look around you right now and find something right next to you wherein you cannot see that font. It's too small, or it's printed in a really weird color and whatever. Usually with things like lip balms or the backs of makeup things, whatever. So again, the whole idea of like a specific font size is not something that really exists. Basically, the big guideline is font in relation to the size of the display panel. So there's that. Now, another point of this FPLA that's been very big confusing on soap forums and, the interwebs for years, decades, whatever, is the business name and address on your packaging. And something like, 10 years ago, that was true. You had to do that. But, so here we go. Section C. This is important. The statement of the place of business shall include the street address, city, state, and zip code. However, The street address may be omitted if it is listed in a readily accessible, widely published, and publicly available resource, including but not limited to a printed directory, electronic database, or website. So I talked to CPSC about this. I talked to the FTC about this, and I asked them, because I have never had my full address on my packaging, not when I was working at home and it was a home-based online only business, not when I started my shop and I was in a brick and mortar. It's never happened because I had already asked them this question a bajillion years ago when I first licensed and started the company. I have a website. That address is on that website. I have a Facebook page. That address is on that Facebook page. I can easily add my business to Google directories, whether I work at home or not. And then that's in a Google directory, essentially online, yellow pages. So is that okay? Both the FTC and the CPSC said then and now, yes, that's okay. And so for all of the people, and I know you've seen it, that somebody will post a label because they want to get it right. They don't want to mess up. And they'll post their label on one of these soap forums on Facebook. And people will, just be really mean and just like slam all of it. Like, I hate your logo. I didn't ask you about my logo. I asked if I got all the stuff right. And two, they'll misrepresent the need for having the business address, the street address on the label, thus leading to more confusion across the board. Go to the tapes. Go to the receipts. You don't have to have this. This is not required. 95% of soapers I know work from home and they do web sales. Do you really want your home address on every little piece of whatever that you sell at a fair, make it make sense? The FTC, CPSC, they've decided, no, that's not necessary for home-based businesses. And these sorts of things will continue to evolve even more as we start to see the shift more and more and more to people working from home and not going to proper offices or retail stores or whatever, because retail is dying. Brick and mortar has been on the way out for a decade. So all of these businesses are going to start shifting to different areas and the laws will change accordingly. But this particular section has changed. You are not required to put your business address, which could be your home address, on every single label of everything that you sell. So there's that. Okay, now on to ingredients. The FPLA does not specifically list anything for ingredients within the act itself. Instead, they have given that to the FDA. The FDA regulates cosmetics. CPSC regulates soap, which means, weirdly, you're not required to put your ingredients on your soaps. I don't agree with this. I think you should put your ingredients on there. If you're going to label your soaps, which, if you don't want to, that's fine too. I actually have a lot of soaps that are sold naked, a lot of products that are naked, and a lot of people prefer to do that because they don't want the extra paper use. And so they will buy a naked bar at the shop or whatever. And that's great because all of my ingredients are listed online. So I think you should put your ingredients on your labels. But I mean, you do you live your best life, whatever, but I think you should do it. I think it's a responsible move as a business owner to be very transparent with what it is that's going into your soaps. Even though soaps are just, by definition, oils and lye and what comes from that, as we talked about in the last video. So for me, I put ingredients. There are no specific requirements for how those ingredients are supposed to be listed. And you have a lot of different ways that you could list them. You could list them by their INCI name, right? And so they're very scientific, whatever. You could list everything that goes into the pot. in the order that it goes into the pot or in the biggest quantity. Generally, the rule of thumb and the way that consumers read labels these days is largest quantity down to smallest. And so if you're going to choose to put your ingredients on your soaps, I would treat them like a cosmetic and do it that way. Most in the bar to least. And so you would start out with your most percentage of oils and then go down to probably your micas. You're going to have the smallest amount of that when it's all said and done. So you can do that. Or you can also list your ingredients as far as what comes out of the pot. We're talking lots of examples here. You could do saponified oils of ... So it'd basically be something like saponified oils of olive, coconut, palm, and including kaolin clay, activated charcoal, essential oils, fragrances, micas. Right. You can do that, or you can also go, sodium cocoate, sodium tallowate, and name what it actually is once saponification is complete, once that oil has become, once it's mixed with the lye solution. You can do that too. In both cases, it's omitting the lye, and in both cases, it's accurate. So I've done it both ways, putting everything that goes into the pot, so olive oil, coconut oil, palm oil, distilled water, sodium hydroxide, kaolin clay. I've also done saponified oils of ... I've also done sodium stearate. And all three of those are right. And in actuality, none of that is misleading. While I don't believe it's misleading to put your ingredients list saponified oils of ... or the new name of the oil mixed with the lye, stearates, the cocoates, etc., and so forth, I do think it's misleading when you start claiming that your soap is lye-free. Your soap is lye-free. That is true. In a properly formulated recipe, all of the lye is consumed in the making of the soap, and so once it hits hardened form, goodbye lye, it's not there. But saying your soap is lye-free really confuses the consumer. And by confusing the consumer, you could be in violation of something, for sure. But also, you're hurting the entire industry. The soap making community that you're in, you're hurting. It's because the next person that comes along and somebody asks, like, you have no idea how many times I have been asked in my shop, I only use lye-free soap. And I've responded in multiple ways over the years. Like, oh, cool. Technically speaking, all soap made this way is lye-free at the end. And so that's cool. Then recently people have started to go, oh, well, I only use soap-free body bars, beauty bars. And then I ask them what they are, and I start looking it up on the interwebs, and they're listing their ingredients, sodium cocoate, sodium That's soap. That's soap. And so this stuff becomes very misleading to the actual consumer. And I don't think that's what we want to do as a community. So while it is not untrue to say that your soap is lye-free, it serves you really no purpose in marketing your soap as thus. That doesn't make sense because for the most part, the average consumer does not give a shit how the soap is made. The average consumer does not give a shit what oils go into the soap as long as said oils are not going to cause an allergic reaction, which is why you should always list your ingredients just to cover your own ass because, if you put almond oil in it and the person's allergic to almond oil, they can turn it over and go, oh, there's almond oil in this, I better not. But the average consumer does not care how this thing was made. They care about, was it responsibly sourced? Was there cruelty to animals involved? Is it a skin irritant? Is it allergy-free? Was it processed in a big plant? I mean, those are the things that is it vegan? Is it not vegan? Those are the things that people care about when it comes to their products right now. So saying that something is lye-free actually doesn't benefit you at all. And it's misleading to the consumer. Technically not an inaccurate statement and one that you can make, but I don't think you should. So net, at the end of all of that, if you're going to do an ingredient declaration, which I think you should, you can label what goes into the pot. You can label what comes out of the pot. I would follow cosmetic labeling guidelines and list it in order of most in the product to least. But there's still no real regulations that the CPSC has put on this soap product that they govern. It's nice to live in this really confusing gray area of governmental structure, right? So what does this all mean? We are looking at the FDA, the CPSC, the FTC, the FPLA, all of these things. And we learn that you can label your soaps or not. In either way, you're in compliance of the law. If you do decide to label your soaps, you have to say what it is, how much it weighs, and where it's from. But the street address does not need to be on your products if you can be found, if your business can be found on a website, basically on the internet. If you choose to do an ingredient declaration for soaps, label it what goes into the pot or what comes out of the pot. Either way, completely fine, but still your call. So this does put us in a bit of a confusing place though, right? We want to be in compliance with the law. We want to make sure that we're doing things right, but the law is very kind of murky on this because as I said in the last video, people really mostly don't care about soap. It's a pretty innocuous product. It's very unlikely to hurt people, despite what everybody is constantly saying about anecdotal bullshit. It really, if you are formulating your batches well and doing your due diligence and your testing, soap is very innocuous. It's on your skin for 5, 10, 30 seconds, and then it's gone. And in most cases, if you've been a responsible soap maker, it's going to be just fine for consumer use almost across the board, which is probably why the FDA doesn't care about it. And the CPSC has not focused a whole lot of resources on really sussing out what this thing is that they're responsible for. But still, we want to be the soap makers that give our customers all of the information, and we want to make sure that we do it right. So how do we do that? Well, honestly, I personally would follow cosmetic labeling guidelines for that, just to make sure that you're on the up and up with everything. Because I don't know a soap maker alive that has not dipped their toe into making bath bombs or lotions or lotion bars or beard oils or shampoo bars, things that are cosmetics. And so therefore they need to be labeled that way anyway. So you might as well just get with the cosmetic labeling for all of your products and just get in that mindset. So that's what you know you have to do every time. And you don't forget some little detail that needed to be put on this product, but not that product, right? So that's where we're going to go for the next video, is the cosmetic labeling and really diving deeper into that and what that means. Spoiler alert, it's still not nearly as detailed and complicated as other people have made it on the interwebs. It's really not. It's kind of like learning, you know, your MLA format or your APA format or your Chicago style or whatever in school. Once you figure out these couple bullet points, your brain will just immediately do that every time. And this is how you format your product labels. Go do B. So we will talk about that next time. But this one actually is getting really long. I did just want to cover soap and why it is a gray area with CPSC versus the FDA, what you can and cannot do, and just give you some information to, I don't know, maybe assuage your concerns that you're doing something wrong because you opted to go with the more scientific sounding. Because like sodium cocoate sounds scientific as shit, right? So that's cool. So you can do it that way and it's not wrong. And so for all of the times that you see people posting things on the Facebook forums or whatever with a screenshot of a big company or a company going, they can't label their soaps like this, it's wrong. It's not wrong. It's probably not wrong. But those are for all the reasons that we just discussed. I am still going to encourage everyone to label their soaps using cosmetic labeling guidelines, but as I said, that's for another video because this one is getting long. It's still very, very early in the morning, but I have to get to the soap shop because I have a big crazy day. So hope you guys learned something. I will answer any questions below, so ask away, do the things. Yes, hope you guys have an excellent day, even though by the time I get this out, it's still going to be evening. So I'm sorry, it's a busy day. But I do appreciate everyone joining me for another round of 365 days of soap. A special big appreciation to all of my sudsers. You guys are amazing. You're the ones that keep me ticking. I'm going to go get more coffee and wake up for this crazy day, but I will see you guys all again tomorrow for another round of soapy fun. Bye.